Okay, upcycling is slightly different from recycling. Recycling is reusing or reselling the garment, and there's a bit of confusion with these terms, or they get used differently by different people. So um, you don't have to sort of memorize this kind of definition. But basically, upcycling is we take a garment and we push it back up the supply chain. So that might mean taking it back to the factory where they will then pull it apart, alter it, and put it back together to make it into a new garment. So I'll give you three examples of this. First one is ASOS. Where's ASOS? ASOS and reclaimed vintage. So not many people know about this, but these are garments that have either been in stock and storage for a number of years, and it's unsold stock. So what ASOS have said is, well, why don't we actually turn it into a range and call it vintage and try to sell it that way. Some of it's repurposed, so it's actually been altered to make it a little bit more relevant to today's market as well. But it's certainly an interesting way to present the garment. So some argue that you should make a point of selling your garment as being upcycled, whilst others argue it should just happen in a natural scheme of things without consumers even knowing about it. So there's different points of view as to what you do with these garments. Another one is reformation, and this is my favorite. Where are we? Small brand, but very interesting brand. So where are we? Definitely check out this site. So have a look at their standards. Up to two-thirds of the sustainability impact of fashion happens at the raw materials stage. I tend to disagree with that, but I'll go with it for now. Um, but what this brand is doing is saying we're going to think really carefully about the fibers and fabrics we use. And if you look at their five categories, they're saying, the best we're looking for is natural fibers that are rapidly renewable, plant-based, and have a potential for circularity being used over and over again. And then the E's are the absolute nevers that we'll use before, that they'll never use in their range. If I just go down, definitely check out these fiber standards and methodology, because if you're aiming for HD in this final assessment, some of their methodology will give you good ideas of how to ensure you make a garment which is more sustainable than the current range. So, you know, they're in love with Tencel. They think it's the best because it's a closed loop system. You may remember it from materials um, as one. So there's a lot to be said for it. There's no excess water that's put back into the ecosystem. It's all controlled. But I'm just going to go down and show you one other thing, which is here somewhere. Where are you? No, 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 no. Yeah, here. Have a look at this. Recycled cashmere. Just to give you an example, we get everyone loves cashmere. It's warm, cozy, super delicious against your skin. Unfortunately, the global demand for it has led to goats overgrazing in Mongolia. That means land system change, planetary boundaries. So it's basically turning grasslands into deserts, a bit like our example with our deserts. So again, um, suggesting a tipping point, it becomes a desert. Yeah, pretty scary. That's why we use recycled cashmere. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's just a little example how you can take a snippet like that, apply the theory that we've covered to give you a better understanding of what's actually happening behind that, or why it's bad, as they say, or scary, as and dead stock and vintage again. They use that as well. So definitely check out this website. It's one of my favorite brands in terms of their approach to it. I think they're a kind of benchmark brand that will inform a lot of the industry. Oh, and a mast. Yeah, I forgot about Paul Castro. Just show you this one. This is Paul Castro, who is one of the teachers at on our campus. And what he did what he used to do, he used to go around to companies, mainstream companies like Target, Kmart, and ask if they had any excess stock, unsold stock that was no longer fashionable, that was just sitting in their warehouse. And and these companies have a lot of stuff just floating around. And he would take those garments. He would then give himself the challenge of redesigning those garments into a fashionable item. So in this case, he's taken jeans and turned it into a jacket. So it's a great exercise for designers because you've got to work within the constraints of what you have available, and it's also beneficial because you're using a product which already exists and giving it a second life or a second chance in doing so. So it was upcycling on a different model. Interestingly, though, after a while, these companies stopped supplying him because they didn't like the idea of their clothes being used um, by another designer, or by a designer, I should say. Okay, recycling at Patagonia. If we have a look at Patagonia, again, one of their philosophies in their worn wear range. So this is a label, if you like, within the Patagonia range. So it's interesting. You don't have to, you can create labels out of processes. It doesn't have to be the spring summer collection of 2020. It can be a process which you label and sell your garments based on that label. And look at the Commons Threads policy or their program. You wear it, in particular, wear it out if you can. You drop it off to Patagonia. So now they're not only a seller of clothes, but they're also taking those clothes back. We, Patagonia, recycle it, and then it lives on. And if we go to their worn wear range, I'm not sure I've got a link here too. Oh yeah, no, I did have it here. Okay, where are we? Drop it in the mail, not the landfill. Clever. Oops. Stay there. Clever marketing, and mail it, and you get store credit. Where is it there? Trade it in and get a credit. So they're incentivizing the customer to send it back. And then the garments are recrafted. So again, they're creating a brand out of a process. And let's shop the collection. Right, so these are garments made out of other garments that have been sent back. It's not their full range. A lot of their garments are virgin garments made out of raw materials, but at least they're sort of plugging this into the range. Well, I don't like that much. Interesting. Recraft jackets, all made out of clothes. And as I've said to you over a few lectures, Patagonia is another really good example of a benchmark brand that's been doing this for a long time. So we can learn a lot from that. For a brand like Kmart or Target, it doesn't mean that they make the clothes, but maybe they set up a subsidiary who then repurpose clothes. The Kmart store or the Target store will take the old garment back, send it to this subsidiary, and then they turn it into something else. And worn out garments are chopped into pieces, buttons, zippers, and snaps are removed during the recycling process, and then they give you more information on that. So that's an example of a solution. H&M use, we'll look at their model, their video here. Okay, and Levi's, which we've looked at before, and their 5 t-shirts range, which again, I've got one here somewhere. Okay, and the idea, create the first pair of jeans from post-consumer cotton waste. So basically they've taken old t-shirts and reconstituted the fibers and turned them into a pair of jeans. So it's just another approach. And Levi's, again, are one of the brands that in the last 5 to 7 years have sort of accelerated in the way in which they treat uh, their jeans and sustainability. So if they can make jeans out of t-shirts, why shouldn't they have a process where they take the t-shirts back in? And what would that process look like? I don't think I'll show you anything here now. Got it. Have a look at that. to give you an idea what to do. Retail outlets that sell used clothes. So we're all familiar with Savers, very popular. And you think about that. If you go up to the store in Sydney Road, it's always busy. And you think this is at a time where we're flooded with choice. We're flooded with choice online and in retail stores in the cities, in the Chadstones, etc. Yet people still like to go to Savers. Part of the reason is they get a bargain, but more importantly, they find a unique piece that is they can't find anywhere else, and it's a bit of a prize. Oh, look what I found, is part of the motivation for some of these customers that go there. Recycled Boutique, also on Sydney Road, um, next to the Greens Cafe, is a New Zealand-based company, very successful. You as a consumer take your clothes in, uh, you stock it with them, they set a price. If after a couple of weeks the sale's not achieved, then they drop the price another 2 weeks. If it's not sold within that period, I think they drop it again. And then after that, you either come and pick it up, take it back, or they might actually take it for a really low price, something like that. Again, very popular. It certainly works as a model. One that didn't work was Penny Lane, which was also in Sydney Road. So she, I've forgotten her name now. No, don't remember. It wasn't Penny though. To remember that. She was retailing used clothes, but it was quality used clothes. And one of the problems she had was customers would come in wanting to sell their clothes to her, and they'd be bringing in Kmart clothes, Target clothes, Zara clothes, and she didn't want those clothes. She only wanted uh, better quality products, but also what she said started to become quite difficult is to tell people who are bringing in their loved clothes that the clothes were junk or of a low quality, even though they might be stylish, they're of a low quality. It started becoming a bit touchy because as I said before, clothes are very personal items. So she had to develop quite sophisticated ways of telling people that you know no one's going to buy the clothes that you wear. But she had problems. Basically, there was issues with volume. She wasn't getting enough volume in to make it work, which is another problem. You've got to have enough clothes coming in. And you can imagine for the recycled boutique, for every article of clothing that comes in, there might be 5 or 6 which are not acceptable to them. So there's a considerable amount of time and resources spent selecting items that can be stocked in these stores. So there's pros and cons to that. I'd question, why can't Target or Kmart have a recycled clothes section within their stores? Why do they just have to sell new clothes? As long as you make a sale, doesn't matter where it comes from. Could be. Remember, we're talking about different ways of retailing at this end of life. Okay. In conclusion, it sounds a bit cheesy, but the last stage in the product life cycle of a garment should become the beginning of a new stage in that cycle. So the objective is, if you'll notice, there's a bit of a gap here that doesn't exist with the other ones, not to the same extent. That's because that's the problem that the fashion industry needs to solve. Close the gap so it becomes a closed loop system, and you can continually make clothes, pull them apart, make them again, pull them apart over and over and over again. Then you would have reached sustainability. So sustainability is an aspiration. It's not something that can be achieved overnight. The brands that say they're sustainable, I would argue, are not. They're trying to be sustainable. They're more sustainable, but they're not the sustainable. The mindset of the fashion industry must change from a linear one to a circular or a closed loop approach. It's starting to happen, definitely happening overseas. In Australia, finally, it's starting to kick in. It's taken a while for the Australian fashion scene to really get behind uh, sustainability in a way which is genuine. There's a lot of greenwash. There's a lot of brands that pretend they're sustainable and do nothing really. but just sort of trick us, and that leads to that distrust that I was talking about before. And also, this is another cheesy one, but I thought I'd throw it in there. There is no end, only new beginnings and new opportunities at each stage. Okay, so from 13 weeks ago, when we started with the conceptualization of the range, where we were going to create the range, we then just had to think about what materials we were going to make the product out of. And raw materials kicks into end of life and how you reprocess it. So there's a connection between those two. The way in which you spin and weave the garment, whether you do it by machine or by hand, the dyes you apply will depend on the raw materials you use, and it'll also depend on how you dispose of the garment. So if it's in landfill, you don't want any toxins on your fibers. Garment production was how we make the garment, the wages we pay, the conditions we pay those people in the factories to make it. The retail online, in store, should we sell through a market or through a department store, pros and cons to each of those. Usage, which was, I don't know why that's highlighted, shouldn't be. The washing and drying of the clothes, and then throwing it away. We can chuck it in landfill, we can recycle it or upcycle it and avoid that landfill, or at least avoid it for a short period of time. And then we start again through that whole process. Okay, thank you. The next series is a little bit of a summary on all of these ones. See you then.